What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Jake Waxman here, welcoming you back to Waxman Talks Aviation. And first of all, before I begin with today's topic of Waxman Talks Aviation, I owe you guys a great apology. I'm so sorry that I have not done one of these in 3 months, to be exact. A lot of things have been happening with sports and across all that stuff. But hey, not gonna make any excuses. I apologize. I gotta do better with this. So once again, I do apologize for not posting a Waxman Talks Aviation video in way too long. And now, without further ado, I'm ready to get back in the saddle. I'm ready to talk some aviation. And I got a subject today in terms of aviation. So we've all heard, you all have heard of the bad news around the aviation industry, mostly around Boeing, of course. Can't get planes delivered, got planes falling apart, can't get their 737 MAX 10 or 7 or 777X certified, all that stuff. That's where Airbus is frustrated with Boeing as well because that hurts the aviation industry. But that's not what the topic of this Waxman Talks Aviation video is all about. There's worse news. There's other bad news. Maybe not worse news, but there is bad news. That is, you can argue the case is much more concerning than Boeing not being able to deliver planes. Alright, this year, now, while I will say there's more cases than I can name, there have been a lot of close calls at airports. A lot of what we call, and when I mean close calls, we call these near misses. So, in aviation terms, a near miss is when two aircraft on the same runway almost collide. That's a near miss. It's when we have two planes that come very close to pretty much intercepting each other or colliding with each other. Now, if they were to collide with each other, then it becomes a runway incursion. And that's what this topic is all about. We have had a lot of close calls that have almost led to runway incursions, especially in the last, starting back to late 2023. We had that. We're back in 2023 where we had at John F. Kennedy International Airport, we had a Delta 737-900 have to reject a takeoff because an American Airlines 777 decided to cross the runway at the same time that the Delta 737 was preparing to take off. And they had to hit the brakes hard and had to stay on the ground for they had to ground that flight, from what I understand, while the American 777 was able to take off. But that's just one of quite a lot of cases that have been on the news. And recently, this past week, and just 2 days ago, two new cases of near misses. So, Ronald Reagan International Airport, we had a Southwest 737 and a JetBlue Airbus A320. I could be wrong. I know it was an Airbus. Two planes that came pretty close to colliding. Fortunately, the controller on duty caught it and told both sides to stop. Now that one is actually, believe it or not, on the controller because she gave the order for the Southwest 737 to cross the runway, and then moments later, as the JetBlue was lining up getting ready to take off, she gave the JetBlue permission to take off just as the 737 was getting ready to cross the runway 1 at Ronald Reagan International Airport. So that's what I know about that. It was close. Fortunately, the JetBlue plane had just started, so it was able to hit the brakes and continue on, from what I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. And then just 2 days ago, a Swiss Air aircraft or a passenger plane had to abort a takeoff at John F. Kennedy International Airport because of a group of 4 planes that were crossing the runway in front of it. Fortunately, good instincts by the pilot, because the air traffic controller, from what I understand, did not catch it. The pilot did and announced to the controller, hey, we are rejecting our takeoff. And I think that's another one that just started. So this is what I know. I'm still kind of learning more, but this is alarming. No question. And as an aviation fan, this is very alarming. Safety is the utmost importance, of course, in the aviation industry. And we got to make sure we're able to get flights safely off the ground. But there's a lot of different reasons beyond safety that this is happening. And we're having, as of late, there have been a lot more, as I said, a lot more close encounters than I can name on airport runways, or close calls that could, And if this keeps up, at some point, we're going to have a runway incursion. As things stand right now, sadly, it is only a matter of time until we have a deadly runway incursion. If this keeps up. And there's a lot of different reasons this is happening. One of it, people talk about a pilot shortage. Well, one of the reasons this is happening is we also have an air traffic controller shortage. Amazing. And I mean, getting into air traffic control, getting a career into, from what I understand, to air traffic control, it doesn't cost as much, but does still require a lot of training than to be a pilot, of course. But still, we got a shortage going on there. I don't 100% know why this is. It could also be that airports are... It may also come down to who the airports are hiring. They may be hiring guys who have never had experience, as opposed to air traffic controllers that have been working in the field for years. And you got places like Ronald Reagan Airport and John F. Kennedy, which are some of the busiest airports in the United States. Now, I don't know if this is happening around the world, but in the United States, this is becoming more and more of a problem every single day. Now, we've had years in the past where we've had issues with close calls or close encounters. And this is not a new thing in terms of aviation. And for those of you who do not know, runway incursions, as opposed to encounters, happen quite a bit, but incursions have happened in the past. In fact, the worst accident in aviation history was a runway incursion. This takes me back to 27th of March, 1977, the Tenerife disaster. That was a runway incursion, and that happened due to miscommunication between pilots and controllers. And, of course, a pilot that was in a hurry to go. And the result was 2 Boeing 747s, each with over 200 passengers on board, collided on a single runway at Tenerife. And sadly, on that day, over 500 people died. And it's the deadliest one in history, but it hasn't been the last one either. And the more and more I hear about the news about close calls, the more I start to think we are nearing disaster if we don't make changes soon enough. So, how do we solve this problem? Because we're in it clearly right now. We've got a problem getting controllers, like hiring controllers. We've got a shortage of controllers. And the ones that can work for these airports are overworked as things stand. In fact, they're having to work longer than probably is required. Like, for one of the things I do know, pilots can only work a minimum of 10. They can only work 10 hours a day. After 10 hours, they clock out. That's the workday. And I know I don't know the exact length of the workday for controllers, but I know even at some point they have to clock out. But within the hours that they do have to work, they get minimal breaks. The shifts are very lengthy, and these controllers are getting worn out. And being an air traffic controller, it's stressful. Depending on where you work, it can be really stressful. Like at an airport like John F. Kennedy, Jackson Hartsfield in Atlanta, and Ronald Reagan, because flights are coming and going nonstop, and you got to be on game, on edge. You got to be focused, laser focused. And we're starting to see that controllers that are working may not either are not as focused as they need to be, or they are just fatigued because there's a lack because of this shortage in air traffic controllers, and they're needed ever. And I will say I have considered being an air traffic controller, but I just don't think it's something I'm going to do. And a lot of it is I have trouble handling stress at times, especially in some very pressuring situations. And an air traffic controller, it's a high pressure job because you got to be able to, depending on where you work, of course, because there are some airports like Detroit Metropolitan Wayne County Airport where there's moments where there's a lot of traffic, but at Detroit, there's also moments where there's a break, a calm in the storm, as they say. And then there's moments where it restarts again. So not quite as busy as other airports that I mentioned. So, got an air traffic control shortage. That's not the only problem. Another problem is there's technology out there that can help these airports, like Ronald Reagan Airport, that can help them avoid these close calls. One of these pieces of technology that I've heard of is runway lights that actually will turn red if the runway is occupied. Like, for example, if there's a plane lined up ready to take off, the taxiways adjoining to it lights could be installed on these taxiways where if there's a plane on the runway or a plane like coming into land, they light up red. Like there's a green and then red. If it's light up, it could light up red, indicating to the pilots, hey, either a plane's coming in or this runway is occupied. Do not enter. And then it will turn green when the runway is cleared. I have seen something. I won't say I've seen it in real life before, but I've seen documentaries that show this. Of course, this technology is expensive. But there are some airports that I think make enough money. Okay, it's hard to tell. Problem is, maybe these airports aren't able to make enough money to invest in this technology, but we need to get some funding for these airports so they can invest in technology to prevent future disasters. And also, air traffic controllers have ground radar, so they're able to see where the planes are at from time to time. That's not a problem. So it's just a matter of a couple things, like other systems that could be in place to help the controllers, and also needing to have more controllers on duty. And there's some days where there could be maybe as few as like 3 controllers in the tower at one point. So, if we're going to prevent this, and I will say this, hearing about these stories, I worry for my Uncle Mark. He is a pilot for United Airlines, and I'm worried about him now. Like, I'm worried about his safety because of all these close calls that we're having at airports. So a couple things that we need to do to prevent, if we're going to prevent the next runway incursion, or very deadly runway incursion, we got better training for controllers, and also got to hire more controllers. Also, hiring practices. We got to work on that too. Make sure the busiest airports are getting the best controllers available. You need experience. Controllers, like airports that are really busy, need the best controllers possible. Those who have enough experience, who have worked enough years where they can stay on their feet, stay on edge, and stay laser focused. A new controller will have trouble with that at first because they got to learn what it's like. So that's one thing we can do. Hiring practices. Like, okay, got to get the best controllers in those towers. And also, I've also heard reports that some of these airports do not treat air traffic controllers very well. Like, I've heard that of controllers like making suggestions to help them out, and the airports just ignore them. And I've heard this is a problem at Ronald Reagan, where controllers are making suggestions that will help them do their jobs better, but Ronald Reagan Airport won't take their suggestion. So I wonder, and I also wonder if those lights that I mentioned about, I wonder if that's something that airports are either they don't have the funding for it, or they just are not even, they do have the funding and they just won't invest in it for whatever reason. So, and also get as many controllers at one time as you can to help really, we got to do whatever it takes to help. The problem being an air traffic controller is there's almost no breaks during the day. The only time you get a break is when your shift's over, from what I understand. So there's very minimal breaks. And unless the traffic really slows down, then no breaks, pretty much. So, we got to help our controllers out, okay? We got to get the best ones at the busiest airports. Also, airports need to do a better job listening to their personnel. Like, they need to do a better... Airports like Ronald Reagan Airport need to do a better job listening to the controllers. Like, they just need some help doing their job, okay? There's nothing wrong with asking for help. Airports need to do more to help them out. Alright, whatever funds you've collected, let's try to use those funds to better improve technology that will help these controllers and avoid consequence, And also, like I said, given the opportunity, invest in this new technology. Okay? Like runway lights that can turn red or green to indicate the status of whether or not a runway is clear or not. Or even a taxiway. Let's see what we can do about that. Or even if you have to take maybe a cheaper way out. Because I know runway lights are not cheap. They are expensive. So, but my overall feeling towards this is we gotta do something. We have got to do something about this issue, because this is becoming more and more of a... We're living in a group of years where runway close calls are becoming way too frequent, and we are nearing closer to what could be a runway incursion. And when that happens, it's going to be a really sad day for the aviation industry. Because flying, folks, flying in an airplane is a lot safer than taking the train or driving or even maritime stuff. Flying is the fastest method of transportation because the aviation industry takes safety very seriously. So, we need, and I will also say this, Congress needs to do more to help the infrastructure of these airports so that the controllers have the help they need. You know, we gotta do, whatever the solution might be, regardless of solutions, we have to do something, or this is gonna get worse and worse, and then before you know it, boom, runway incursion, and a very deadly one, perhaps, because we are getting closer and closer to that happening again, because there's just a lot of issues, whether it's with controller training, or the controllers not getting enough support or enough rest, or even just or airports not investing enough in the runway infrastructure to help out controllers and pilots alike. One thing that has helped, one other thing that has really helped minimize the chances of a runway incursion is the sharpness of our pilots and pilot training. Pilots are taught to always look out for danger around the airport. And fortunately, in some of these close calls that I mentioned, pilot training saved the planes, because the pilots recognized the danger right away and hit the brakes as quickly as they could. I've heard this saying, like, if a controller has a bad day, they go home. If a pilot has a bad day, they may not go home. So, that is what this topic was all about in today's Waxman Talks Aviation. Right now, flying is usually a very safe thing, and I always feel safe flying in an airplane. But as of right now, with how many close calls we've had, what I have to say is we have got to do something. Like, I am concerned. Like, very, very concerned that if the amount of close calls on these airport runways continues to go up, before you know it, at some point this year, we will have a runway incursion. And that is gonna have force the aviation industry to rethink a lot of things. And a lot of times, sadly, changes only come when a disaster happens. But the aviation industry has a chance, especially here in the United States, has a chance to prevent disaster if we take action right away. Do some studying, whatever it takes. But to the aviation industry of the United States, do something before we have a disaster. You gotta do something. Because as safe as flying is, we should never have to make changes after a disaster, major changes that make flying safer after a disaster. So, with all these runway incursions, we got to focus on what specifically is the things I've mentioned. That's where the aviation industry needs to focus in, do some studying and some research, and figure out what can we come up with to help our air traffic controllers and pilots alike. All right. That's all. That's going to be it for this week's Wax on Aviation. Again, I'm sorry I haven't done one of these in a while. 100% my fault, and I hope to continue to do more of these starting next week. But not just sports fans, but to all you people who watched out there, thank you so much for your support, and thank you for watching. Jake, and this has been Waxman Talks Aviation. Catch you next week.